All right, let's get started. I am Seth Grimes. I'm Maryland organizer with the Washington Area Bicyclist Association. I'm going to leave this slide up on the screen for just a moment to say that WABA empowers people to ride bikes, build connections, and transform places. We envision a just and sustainable transportation system. So that's what this meeting is all about. Thank you to the participants. We have with us Delegate Anne Healey from District 22 in Prince George's County, and Antoine Thompson from, well, actually, you can introduce because I don't remember the name of your organization, but I know you as from the Train Commission, which we will get into a bit later. This meeting is being recorded. I will follow it up with an email message with links for the slides that I did prepare for the program and with other material that we will be sharing about legislation. So let's get into it. I did prepare some slides, and the first one I'm going to show is this one, which comes from a Maryland state website called Zero Deaths Maryland. You can break out the fatalities on our state's roads over the last several years, including Prince George's. If you look statewide, Prince George's has the highest number of road deaths in Maryland. It is over three times the number of road deaths as Montgomery County, and that is shocking. We have a commitment to zero deaths on the roads in the state of Maryland, in Prince George's County, in other jurisdictions. So we need to do something about this. This program is not only about bicycles and pedestrians, it is about all road users, vulnerable road users in particular. So among the 128 road deaths in Prince George's last year, we see 39 pedestrians and 3 bicyclists. It's great having these data systems available, but they really reveal what the issues are. So we are going to talk about the Maryland State Legislative Session, and we're going to talk about the Maryland Transportation Funding picture, which is not good. And we're going to talk about how to get involved in advocacy in Annapolis in the legislative session. And then I will also mention at the end of the program, which I do hope to keep to an hour, an initiative that WABA is undertaking called Complete State Roads, Prince George's County. So I have the legislative session dates up here. The session opened last Wednesday, the 10th. We have deadlines for introduction of the budget, for filing of bills. We have the State of the State address on February 7th. I put in bold here the Bike Maryland Symposium in Annapolis on February 15th. Some others on the call will talk about that a little bit later. We have a concept of crossover when a bill that has passed one house, it has to pass one house by a certain date, by March the 17th, in order to be considered in the other chamber of the legislature. And then the legislative session ends normally on April the 8th. So these are the rough dates and the parameters. We do have a slate of bills that we have been working on. By we, I mean WABA and also Bike Maryland, which is a coalition of groups that includes Bike More in Baltimore. It includes Howard County, Anne Arundel, and Annapolis, bike groups, as well as individuals statewide. So we just had a meeting an hour and a half ago to go over our legislative agenda. This slide here has a start on the bills. We'll go over the whole list a little bit later, but I want to be respectful of Delegate Healey's graciously agreeing to join us by turning over the microphone to her in just a moment to talk about particular bills that she's working on. You can see them listed, the 2 bills in particular, toward the bottom of the slide that you should be seeing now. One concerns the responsibility for maintaining sidewalks and bicycle pathways, is the term that state codes uses along state roads. Right now, the local jurisdiction is tasked with maintaining those, even though they're built in the state right of way. And Prince George's County wants to see that change. Montgomery County wants to see that change, and Delegate Healey is introducing a bill there. And then also a bill on stop sign cameras. So I just pulled up a page from the Maryland General Assembly's page, a website rather, about Delegate Healey. You can go to this website yourself. In the box here, we have the URL for the site. There you can look up information about legislators, about legislation, the meeting of the various committees, and so on, the status of bills. I called out here a button that's on the upper right of the screen called My MGA. If you do wish to create a tracking list for legislation that's out there or submit testimony on bills, sign up to testify, you're going to be doing that through My MGA. It's not our purpose right now to do a tutorial on how to use the system. I just wanted to mention it in case you'd like to go out to the Maryland General Assembly legislative site and poke around a bit, and you'll find some interesting things there. So I'm going to stop my share here and actually one more slide. This is the Prince George's County local bill that Delegate Healey has introduced. I'm going to stop my share here and turn it over to Delegate Healey to talk about her legislation. And then I would hope she'll also talk a bit about the whole overall legislative process and how these bills will be passed, and the role that advocates like the people who are attending this call can play in getting bills passed. And then take some questions from you all. So stop the share and thank Delegate Healey, District 22, for participating.
Thank you very much, Seth, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. I'm happy to spend a little bit of time with you talking about a couple of bills and about the committee I serve on, which is the Environment and Transportation Committee of the General Assembly of the House of Delegates. And I can also explain a little bit about the legislative process. But I will start with talking about these two particular bills because I think there's a lot of interest in them. The first bill is one that Seth and WABA have asked for, and I agree. It's well past time to try to do this. The current policy of state highway is to require that for sidewalks or bike paths along state highways, the local government, either a municipality or county, must petition the state highway administration and enter into an agreement in which they agree to maintain the facility basically in perpetuity. The state highway administration will build it under those conditions. That has been the policy probably for the last 30 years. I have been in the legislature 33 years, and I was part of the group that was allowed this policy to be adopted 30 years ago. Before that, state highway had a policy against building anything along state highways that they wanted. It was only for traffic. It was only for vehicles. And they didn't want sidewalks or bike paths or anything else. All their money wanted to go to that. So we had to pass legislation to require that they allow sidewalks was the big issue at the time to be built along state roads. And in the urban areas, as you know, possibly in Prince George's County, in my district in particular, in the northern part of Prince George's County, we needed sidewalks along many major roads, US 1 and Kenilworth Avenue and East-West Highway, and just all around 450. There were very dangerous situations where people were getting hit and killed when they're trying to they had to walk in the street to get from one place to another in these very urbanized areas. So the art of politics, the art of the possible, at the time, we had to do a lot of compromises. And one of the compromises was that the local governments would take on the responsibility for maintaining them. And we had to also originally agree to a statewide cap on how much money could be spent to build them. All that has changed a lot over the last 30 years, but what has not changed is the requirement that the local governments ask for and agree to maintain the facilities. And I think it's long past time to change that and to allow that to be a point of negotiation. I have been in negotiations with State Highway. I have been talking to the administrator to see, because I don't want them to totally oppose the bill. It will make it impossible for it to pass. But I'm hoping that we can find a compromise that will probably center around something like what does it mean to maintain? If it's and we've talked about this, about who's gonna, shovel the snow and mow the lawns and those kind of things. The local governments, I think most of them wouldn't object to doing that. They already have the equipment to shovel snow and mow lawns and so forth in their public works. The issue is for the really serious things as the facilities start to deteriorate, when the pavement starts to break down and needs to be repaired. So I think if maybe there's a potential for some compromise there, and I will be working on that. I'm going to explain a little bit more about the committee system in a minute. I want to talk about the other bill, which is also very important, the Prince George's County bill, which is to allow camera enforcement for all kinds of different, especially stop signs, but all kinds of different traffic control. So that, like, you have, in addition to stop signs, you have one-way streets and do not enter and no left turn. And anything where there's a sign that tells you that you can't or you shouldn't do something, that we can have camera enforcement. They can put a camera on that sign and get a picture of somebody who's violating it and send them a ticket, just the way it's being done for speed cameras. And I think that if we can get that, I tried a couple times to do it statewide. Last year, I allowed the bill to be voted down, and I announced that I would reintroduce it as a local Prince George's County only bill, because it is very much wanted and needed in Prince George's County. And probably the worst thing that has happened since last year, there were two children, young children, 10 and 5 years old, who were hit and killed in Riverdale Park, crossing in a crosswalk on their way to school at 8 o'clock in the morning, the week before Thanksgiving. And they had an adult with them, helping them to get across. The adult was also hit, but he did not get killed. He was injured, seriously injured, went to the hospital. If there had been cameras on the stop signs at that intersection, they would have evidence to know what exactly happened and whether somebody went through the stop sign, why somebody would hit children in a crosswalk at 8 o'clock in the morning. There was sunlight, there was an adult. What there was not there was a crossing guard. And that is something that I'm still working on. I'm hoping that in the Prince George's delegation, we may be able to add a provision that the monies collected from the enforcement on these devices could partially be used to help pay for more crossing guards, because we really need them in Prince George's County. So those are the two bills. Now I'm going to shift and talk a little bit about the legislative process. We have 90 days to process all the bills. We have all the deadlines that Seth put up there in order to make that possible. So every bill gets a public hearing if it is introduced on time. And if it's not introduced on time, if it gets in late, or it may or may not get a hearing. So that's a really important part of it. We'll have these bills will be heard in the Environment and Transportation Committee, the committee that I serve on, and in the subcommittee on motor vehicle and on motor vehicles. So that will, and the way it happens is we have a public hearing, and then the bill is assigned to a subcommittee where there is a lot of work done on the committee, where the amendments are considered and there's discussion. And the subcommittee then makes a recommendation to the full committee as to whether it should pass or not. There will be a vote. And then if it passes the full committee, it will go to the House floor. And there'll be second reader. There'll be opportunity on the House floor on second reader for amendments and debate. Mostly that doesn't happen. Most of the time, by the time it gets to that point, it's been fully vetted in the committees, and it will go to third reader. It'll get an up or down vote on third reader and get sent to the Senate, and where it will start the same process again in the Judicial Proceedings Committee of the Maryland State Senate. And I was not able to get this statewide bill out last year, so it never got out of committee last year. It was killed in committee. I'm hoping we have something called local courtesy, where something that affects only one county. If the county delegation wants it, they usually are able to get it. So that's what I'm hanging my hat on this year. So those are the two bills, and that's what I'm trying to do, and a very short explanation of the process. We have 90 days to process everything. So, and we get thousands of bills. We got probably close to 3,000 bills that we have to deal with in 90 days. So we have to be very disciplined about it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, if you have a question, would you it'd be best to use raise hand and I'll call on you. But how can we be effective advocates for these bills? There's an opportunity to testify. Can you describe how we can be effective advocates?
To be an effective, I think probably the best thing, two things. One is to submit testimony on the bills when the public hearing is announced on the website, the General Assembly website. You can monitor that every day, and you can sign up for notices and so forth. And when they have the public hearing, you can sign up to testify or submit written testimony. We have right now, we operate our public hearings on a hybrid way so that you don't have to physically come to Annapolis anymore. You can sign up and testify online in this kind of format with like a Zoom, or you can come into Annapolis and testify before the committee in person. It's all done in one at the same time. And so that's one way. The other way is contacting the members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, particularly the ones on the Motor Vehicle Subcommittee, to advocate with them first, because they get the first lick at these bills. And if they're your representatives and they're in those positions, we listen to our constituents, people who vote for us. Those are the people have the most clout. People think lobbyists have a lot of clout. They do have some clout, but nobody has more clout than the constituent of a person that is in the committee considering the bill. So be polite. Don't kind of be threatening to people or anything like that. That doesn't work. But use your best arguments why it's good public policy to adopt these bills.
We have questions for Delegate Healey. Peter.
Hi, Delegate Healey. I'm wondering if you have any predictions in terms of hearing dates for either of the bills that you're pressing.
The Prince George's bill has a longer road to go through because it has to pass through the delegation first. We'll be taking up those soon, I think. The other bill, the bill on on the bike paths and the sidewalks, I have already dropped in the hopper, but it has not been given a bill number yet. So it could happen within the next day or two that it gets a bill number and it gets assigned to the committee. Once it's in the committee, they'll probably wait until they have a few transportation. They want to cluster the bills together. So we're expecting in our committee some 400 bills before we're done. So we probably right now we're doing kind of briefings from the different departments. We had 2 of them today. We'll have a couple more this week. Probably starting next week, we'll start to look at bills. But they're trying to do them in groups so that the transportation bills are done on one day and environment or agriculture bills get done on another day. Housing bills are done on another day. We have several subcommittees, and so they try to group them so that because a lot of people are interested in several bills in the same area, and it helps the people who are witnesses to be there for that day, to be focused on those. So it's a scheduling issue. I know that we're going to be doing them as expeditiously as possible, but at the same time, we want to make sure we have enough to, we're not going to just have a whole day of hearings on one bill, so it'll be cluster of bills.
We have other questions for the delegate. All right.
Seth, I don't have my hand up because I can't find the button, but Delegate Healey, it's a cliche to say thank you for your leadership when you're talking to a legislator, but thank you for your leadership on these things. And just a point of clarification on the maintenance bill. I was one of the people who suggested this to WABA and to Bike Maryland early on. And the reason wasn't so much maintenance, because we didn't really expect much maintenance. They don't do much now. The reason was we're trying to get new trails built, and they were using this maintenance requirement as an impediment, and in our county in particular. And so anyway, I think this will be a huge removal of a roadblock if we can get this maintenance bill passed. And thank you.
I'm not sure how effective that will be, because as you know, the state does not have the money for anything. We're going to be trying to restore and protect cuts in transportation across the board. So and that is a concern of the State Highway Administration. That's why I'm in negotiations with them about trying to figure out the maintenance. It is onerous if you for them to do all the snow, and they don't have the people to do all the things that they need to do, and so they don't want to take on more when they don't have enough money to do things they're already required to do. So it is going to be helpful to make it to remove the impediment, but the other impediment is not about policy, it's about money. And but those money issues come and go. Once the policy is changed, the money will be there eventually, I believe.
Right. Okay, any other comments or questions at this moment?
If not, I'm going to leave this meeting now and let you continue discussions among yourselves. But I'm very happy to be able to do this with you. And I know that, your leadership with Seth and the other folks Jeff, that have been working with us, will be keeping, and Dan too, keeping up with it as we're going forward. Because there may be a point where you don't want to do it if the compromise is too much. And I really want to know that before I lay myself down on it.
Delegate Healey, before you leave, I just want to, in case you somehow have a free moment tomorrow, between 6 and 7:30, there's a fundraiser for Terps for Bike Lanes, which is a University of Maryland student group
Okay.
at Proteus Cycles.
Okay.
I actually have that here.
Okay, very good. I'm not sure I'm here in Annapolis now for the 90-day duration. So it's, I'm actually calling you from my hotel room. So,
Okay.
I probably can't get to much, but, I will see what I can. And of course, it's very interesting. One of my dear friends and neighbors also owns a bike shop, Arrow Bikes in Hyattsville. So I think it's great to see. Of course, we just finished the bike trail in Hyattsville to the connector that really connects all those networks from going all the way up north, south, east, west, and into DC. I mean, that last quarter mile was a major thing to get done, and it's now there and it's operational. So we're very happy with that.
We are too.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
So next up, I am going to call on Peter and Dan to talk about Bike Maryland, but I have the Terps for Bike Lanes flyer up on the screen here, so you can see the flyer. It's going to be at Proteus Bicycles, which is run by Jeff's family, who's on the call right now, 6 to 7 p.m. on Rhode Island Avenue in College Park, and be great if people wish to attend that. So I'm going to go back here, and I do have tee up a slide for you to talk about advocacy. Peter and Dan, Bike Maryland, you want to tell us what you are and then the symposium?
Sure. So Bike Maryland is an organization that's actually celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. And we're going to make some noise about that sometime after the session is over. But we are dedicated to making biking safe and fun for people throughout the state. And we have a bunch of new board members that joined a few months ago, and we have a whole bunch of new activity that's going on. And so you can look at the website, bikemaryland.org, and we appreciate any sort of contributions, financial or otherwise, that people on this call want to make. We are having, as the slide up shows, our annual bike symposium, which took a break for COVID a couple years. And it's going to be held on the 15th. The doors of the Annapolis City Hall will open a little before 8:30, and people can come in and have coffee and donuts and whatever. And then from 9 to noon approximately, we will have a series of speakers, including SHA Administrator Pines and an academic, Dr. Hamidi from Johns Hopkins, who will talk about a study that she did relating to infrastructure and narrowing lanes and how that enhances bike safety. The other thing that we're focused on for the duration of the session is the session itself. And we are having now weekly meetings. I think they'll be taking place on Mondays in the main. And if you're interested in participating in those meetings, you can send me an email. My email address is chair, CHAAR, at bikemd.org. But Dan and I and people from various sundry places have been active in those meetings. That's sort of the overview of Bike Maryland. I'm happy to take questions about the organization, but Seth, if you want Dan and I to talk about our legislative agenda, we're happy to.
We'll get that into that in a few minutes. Right now, let's talk about the state financial picture. Okay. So I'm going to actually just jump back right into resharing in order to introduce our next participant, whose picture is on the slide that you should be seeing now. Antoine Thompson is a Prince George's resident. He was appointed by Governor Moore to the Train Commission. As you can see, transportation and infrastructure needs. We have a huge transportation funding shortfall in Maryland for the next 6 years or so. And rather than talk about it myself, I'll turn it over to our guest, Antoine. Do you want me to leave this on? You said you have some slides you want to show me.
Yeah, I have some slides. So if you can set it up for me.
Yeah, just give me a second and I will enable you to share.
Sure.
And okay, you should be able to share your slides.
All right. Give me 1 second here.
There we go. Yeah, just want to start a.
All right, just give me one little challenge here. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, you need to start the slideshow though.
Yeah, I'm doing something wrong here, right?
I see slideshow's on the menu bar toward the middle.
You can also just click on each
or just do it like
successive
this.
slide.
Hold on 1 second. I do this all day, every day. I don't know why it's giving me a hard time. Oh, I see it now. There it is. Ah, there you go.
Very good.
All right, I'm like, I do this all day, every day. All right, let me go back. All right, so let me just say good evening, everyone. Antoine Thompson. I am a member of the Train Commission, also CEO of Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition. I live in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Our office covers DC, Northern Virginia, and a good chunk of Maryland, all the way to Baltimore. So really glad to be here with you. Actually, been involved with transportation related issues on and off for a long time. I also used to be a state senator in New York and been in Maryland for 9 years as well, and also was on the city council in Buffalo. So let me just give you a quick rundown for those of you who may or may not know about the Transportation Infrastructure and Revenue Commission. It's basically a 2-year commission. As mentioned, I was appointed by the governor representing the environmental community. In our office, we do a lot with alternative fuels and clean transportation and environmental justice. Just some quick points on some of the issues that we're looking at, and includes a lot, deals with where we're going to go with funding to make some of the type of things you were talking about, but also everything from the highways and roads and bridges to planes and trains and bikes and cars across the state, public transportation and private transportation. As a former elected official, I always say, and I didn't invent this, but a budget is a reflection of the priorities of government. So I just wanted to kind of level set that. These are just some of the members that are on the Train Commission, chaired by Frank, who is this is second rodeo with this commission. But we have a number of state senators to state delegates to major cabinet secretaries and appointees of the governor. And there are a lot of industry people in every walk of life of transportation. And so it's a really robust group, and we have some very hearty discussions. So I just want you to know that as well. So a couple things that you should know. First is that the commission held 5 public meetings in 2023. We'll have a series of public meetings as well. You can go right to the commission's website. We are required to submit 2 reports. So our preliminary report was submitted 2 weeks ago to the governor and the legislative leaders as well. And on January 1st of 2025, we have to submit a final report as well. So we did make a series of recommendations. There's some other recommendations that did not get put into the interim draft, but we'll talk about some of those things as well shortly. Copy of the interim report can be found on the website, and I did put a link. You can copy that link or take a photo of that link as well. So there are some transportation revenue challenges facing the state, and it's not unique to our state. Many states are wrestling with the declining revenues from the gas tax, people doing a lot of remote work as well, right? So that's had significant impact on a loss of revenue. And then other things, everything from e-bikes to scooters to people using public transportation. All of these things are having an impact on the loss of revenue from the gas tax. And why that matters is the gas tax, much of the investments in roads, bridges, and the operating, how they operate with staffing from MDOT is largely driven by the gas tax. So many states have begun to develop different ideas on how they deal with the the transition to cleaner fuel vehicles, but also through the new ways that people are traveling, but also the fact that more people are, doing more remote work. I just read in real estate as well, Fannie Mae is leaving DC. Will they go to a new location? Will they just have people continue to remote? So a lot of things are happening in a residential area, and I always say what happens in the housing and commercial real estate often impacts transportation policies. So a couple of things that you should know, what you can see on here, that the state, once we got the commission, second meeting, boom, we got a big note that the state is facing roughly a $1 billion gap in an operating budget for capital in operating budget, plus a $2 billion gap almost for programs, for capital programs. So the state is looking at a number of things to address that gap. The other thing that you should know is that while we're making a lot of progress in EV adoption in the state, we still have not been able to, make up these numbers through EV adoption. So we've got some work to do. I'm a big EV champion. My office runs 7 different EV related programs. And so we've got to figure out the revenue challenges as well. The other thing is, so I did mention that to you. So let me just get to some of the recommendations that you can see. And a number of members had recommendations, some that, I think going to have some fruit, and some that are going to be, these are only recommendations. Obviously, the governor and the legislature have the ultimate decision making. We just make some recommendations. Just a couple quick things. One thing that kind of stands out is they're looking at trying to, the commission recommended that they increase fees for out-of-state drivers that use the tolls. I think that could bring in some revenue. Clearly, it's not going to bring in enough, but that was an interesting thing as well. The commission recommends that the General Assembly requiring that what I talked about was the easy pass issue. And some people think that that may not be constitutional. I'm not sure. I'm not an attorney, but that's one thing that they're looking at. Commission recommends that they drive a new process for prioritizing the capital plan. A lot of politics that do that. There's no real standardization on how they select those particular things. There's also the idea about surcharge on different fees related to MVA, explore different fee amounts or payment options for low-income individuals. Some people, think that may be fair, that may not be fair as well. But also there was a lot of discussion about the best approach to increase revenue for as people purchase electric vehicles. My perspective on that is, some of us wanted to wait till we break the 100,000 vehicles registered in the state for new cars. And some people say we got to try to get some funding in now. There was a discussion about how do we generate revenue for EVs as well? Is it based on looking at people's odometers and miles traveled per day? And some people are concerned about the equity issues related to some of those things as well. But those are some of the ideas, and some of the recommendations are on the site as well. These are just some additional things, kind of high level things that I want you to think about. So one, we got to look at raising fees. Some people don't want to raise taxes. Some people do want to raise taxes because the state has some issues. And you also need to put this in the context that a lot of state and local governments over the last 3 years had a tremendous amount of money from COVID from the federal government. And so states are trying to realign now that that money is dried up. And so with that COVID-19 money drying up at the state and local level, now many states have deficits all over the country. Many states have different deficits and they're looking at different ways. So just a couple of things for you. So increasing fees on EV drivers is one thing they're talking about, and raising and coming up with all different type of ways to raise fees. Always really concerned about when elected officials just get desperate for funds. We need to be very methodical on how we do that so we don't punish consumers. The other thing that one of the ideas that I did propose that I will be really pushing a lot of the transportation and environmental groups to look at is an environmental transportation and infrastructure bond act. This was done in New York State 2 years ago. They passed it in New York State by the voters, and you should read up on that bill. It was a great bill, provided over $3 billion for transportation, environmental, and infrastructure initiatives, everything from clean school buses to bike trails and other transportation needs. So I think with this being a presidential election year, the state needing some revenue, people not really wanting to raise taxes, doing a bond act makes sense. And these things are often very popular. This is a presidential election year, so you have a high turnout in Maryland, unlike in a gubernatorial year. And this would it's not a panacea, but it will be a great way to continue to make investments in infrastructure and in our green policy initiatives. Because what's going to happen, as you just heard from the delegate, when revenues are tight, they're going to start looking at scaling back on all these great climate initiatives, sustainability initiatives. And Maryland's been really good at passing laws, but we've been really short on our investment in green infrastructure and alternative fuels. So I just wanted to share a few of those things with you, and I'll take any questions.
Great, thank you. So do we have questions for Antoine? So I believe that Peter, I'll finish my question. I believe that the way that we as advocates have to weigh in on what you've just reported out is by talking to our state legislators who are actually going to enact the budget bills.
Yeah, very, very much so. I would strongly encourage you to talk with them. You know, you saw the numbers, they've been all over the papers, but we got to make sure that there's a scalpel approach towards cuts, or in that they are very cerebral when it comes to any revenue increases, right? Because they're looking for revenue, and it needs to be, we need to have common sense approaches to some of the revenues and fees that they are thinking about implementing in the transportation sector.
Peter?
Just so that I understand it, the bond idea is like any sort of commercial bond. It would go out into the market and people would invest in it, and the cost to the state would be, how do you gauge that? I mean, if $3 billion in bond is sold, making that money available, how does the state pay that back, and what's the impact on budget from that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have all the numbers in front of me right now, but they would pay that back over most times, depending on every state is different, usually over 10, 20, 30 years bonds. And they have investors that purchase bond things, particularly for the your bonds. So that's not uncommon. Many states do it, and it's probably one of the least painful ways to generate revenue. And, Maryland has some, Clean Cars 2 and Cars 1, all these different bills that have been great, but we don't have the funding to support a lot of these things. So we are so far behind. I mean, California, for example, 50%, at least as of last year, over 50% of all electric cars in the United States are purchased out of California. Then it's the rest of the 49 states in the District of Columbia, right? The same is true with hydrogen and other investments in alternative fuels and clean transportation. Fuels that some people on this call may not be as popular with. All of them are pretty much more plentiful, top figures in one of the most aggressively regulated states in the country. That's because they invest so much into these programs, these initiatives, and the infrastructure. And it's not that everyone in California is rich. We know there are poor people, there are working people everywhere, but they've made a commitment to these, not just with policy, but through funding. And I'm very concerned that given the state of the state financially, if we don't come up with alternative revenue streams, the adoption and implementation of the things that we all care about will be dramatically slowed. And that's not even including what may happen on a federal level with the election in November, which could dramatically bring things to a halt like it did for solar and wind a few years ago.
We have other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you for participating. I'm going to need to follow up with you personally about EVs and see if you have thoughts about extending that to support for electric bicycles, but I'll do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We love electric bikes and we love to collaborate on that as well. Absolutely.
I love hearing that, and so I'm going to follow up with you about that. All right.
Yes.
Well,
Thank
you for participating. So at this point, we're going to revert back to talking about bills, and I'm going to share again this slide here. I have two slides about bills. This isn't every single bill that we're working on, but it's the major ones. And it is not the intention right now to go into great depth in any one of them, but to give you a taste for this. These are bills that we will want to submit testimony for when the hearings come up, to actually testify if you can remotely, or in the Senate. I believe you have to actually show up in Annapolis, participate in the Bike Maryland Symposium, which has a lobby component, and talk to your legislators then. Again, this is to give you a taste. If there are people on the call right now who are involved in any particular bills here and would like to talk about them, you can jump in at that point. But I'm going to also share with you a document that has a longer paragraph on the bills that we're going to be talking about. And as Peter mentioned earlier, the Bike Maryland has been convening meetings to discuss the bills and the advocacy, and we're open for additional participants. So looking at this list, again, I'm just going to mention things and give people an opportunity to jump in with comments and questions. First up, a Great Maryland Trails Act that would create a Maryland Trails Office. We've been led to understand that the state of Maryland is going to set up some form of, what was the word, a trails team that would fall short of this. But the idea is to coordinate trails initiatives among the various counties and I guess municipalities within the state, because trails don't end at the border of one county. They should be continuous throughout the state in order to create a true network. We do have networks in various forms, for instance, the Capitol Trails Network, as well as multi-state trails, the East Coast Greenway, and so on. So anyone involved in any of these want to, because I know some of you are on the call right now, want to comment on the Trails Act or anything related. All right, let's move on. Electric bike rebates. I think this is a wonderful thing myself.
Seth, I think Daniel was about to jump on. I don't know.
Oh, please go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right.
Yeah, this is Daniel Pascal with the East Coast Greenway Alliance. Just want to quickly mention, shout out to all the help of Bike Maryland's getting together the Great Maryland Trails Act. And I know WABA played a big part in that as well. We see this as just the beginning. There was a lot of great language, as Seth mentioned, in the Maryland's bicycle and pedestrian master plan. That's been a draft so far, but it's about to be released. So we see this as a turning point for the state. They want to update the statewide trails network, which hasn't been updated since 2009. So there's a lot of missing links, especially in Prince George's County and across the state along the Greenway, but also other, major connections on the Capitol Trails network and other trail links. So yeah, look out for that in the plan, as well as, the act coming up.
Very good.
I'll
I'm
just
hoping
add that the Capitol Trails Coalition, which is something that WABA and Rails to Trails Conservancy and National Park Service are all involved in, as well as I think 80 other local agencies and groups. The biggest need for trails is in Prince George's County. And we really want to push, and that's part of the reason that we're interested in these maintenance issues, is because we want the county to be incented to have these things built and have some means of maintaining them. And so anybody on the call who's interested in trails per se, the Capitol Trails Coalition is a great place to start. And you can also email WABA folks about it, but that's just something I wanted to highlight.
Very good. So back to e-bike rebates. This is a program that would include a very substantial portion that is income qualified. And the idea is that e-bikes are transformational for some people who adopt them, including cargo bikes that people use to transport their kids to school. And it's far more environmentally cost-effective than electric vehicles to do e-bikes. It's only $100,000 because of the state's financial situation. This is what the sponsor, Delegate Robin Lewis from Baltimore, thinks that she can get in the General Assembly. So I'm hoping as we go down this list, you'll see things that you would like to get involved in. I'm going to share a form in a few minutes for you to respond. You can always write directly to myself or to me or Peter or others. Going on, Stop is Yield. The District of Columbia recently enacted a Stop is Yield. They recently enacted an e-bike rebate program, but that is far safer for bicyclists. Proceed through a stop sign without stopping if the coast is clear and there are no pedestrians or anything like that. So that will be introduced by Delegate Elizabeth Embry from Baltimore. It has not been assigned a number yet. We have the Sarah Debbing Langenkamp Memorial Act. Sarah was crushed, is the word that her husband Dan uses, by a truck in August of 2022 on a state highway, River Road in Montgomery County, in a bike lane. The driver of that truck was negligent and got off with a $2,000 fine and community service. This act would redress the situation to create much stiffer penalties, including possibly incarceration for drivers convicted of striking a cyclist. We have those for hitting a pedestrian in a crosswalk, higher penalties. We need them for hitting a cyclist in a bike lane. We talked about Delegate Healey's two bills, so I'll go on. We have a bikes on sidewalks bills that would make that the default for the whole state. Right now, it is not the default, and some counties, including Montgomery, have allowed bikes on sidewalk, but it is safer for getting around than forcing a bicyclist into the street. That passed by 135 to 2 in the House of Delegates in 2023, but it ran out of time to pass. As Delegate Healey mentioned, she used the figure of something like 3,000 bills. A lot of good bills run out of time. So that bill has been introduced. Another bill introduced, a Vision Zero Advisory Commission. This is Delegate Julie Plakovich-Carr. It has been introduced in the Senate, however, by Senator Jeff Waldstreicher, and it's to provide some accountability on implementation of Vision Zero. If you were with us at the beginning, you saw the horrible, terrible road safety statistics from Prince George's County. We as a state, we as counties are not meeting our Vision Zero's commitments to decrease, to eliminate road deaths and serious injuries. Another bill would require the Maryland Transportation Authority, which runs the bridges that are owned by the state, to provide bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, and also the ways to cross the roadways that they run. This is important because it is hard to get across a waterway. And so we saw promises that were not fulfilled there by the Maryland Transportation Authority. The Harry Nice Bridge was supposed to have facilities and doesn't. The Intercounty Connector in Montgomery County and into Prince George's was supposed to have continuous bike paths and doesn't. Number 10 is another bill of Delegate Robin Lewis's for camera enforcement of dedicated bus lanes. Keep the vehicles out of them that don't belong there. This is actually a pro-bike bill because by default, bicyclists are allowed to use dedicated bus lanes. So this makes that use of those lanes safer for bicyclists. Another bill of Robin Lewis is to create higher registration fees for heavy passenger vehicles and Class E trucks. We are seeing a great toll taken by the rise of the literal rise of heavy passenger vehicles. I myself was hit by a massive pickup truck in October in the District of Columbia. Fortunately, I wasn't really seriously injured, but the visibility is really poor with these vehicles. They're also environmentally costly, and this would do a bit of redress by raising the fees. A really key bill, and if Lindsay Mendelson is still on the call, I will check. I'd actually invite her to talk about it. It looks like she dropped off. Lindsay is with the Sierra Club Maryland and is one of the leads in this bill, which would require that major projects offset their greenhouse gas and vehicle miles traveled impact via mitigations that do include bicycling infrastructure, as well as other mitigations that are much greener than road work. And the final bill that we list here is one that was initiated by the State Highway Administration that would allow them to reduce the speed limit on a state road by 5 miles an hour without doing a traffic study. The need to do a traffic study is expensive. It adds a lot of delay to projects. It discourages, just like the maintenance responsibility question that we discussed earlier, discourages building sidewalks and bike lanes. The need for a traffic study in association with speed limit reductions discourages doing those speed limit reductions. And we do know, the studies show that speed limit reduction is absolutely one of the top things that we can do to reduce the rate of deaths and major serious injuries on our roads. So this is a recap of bills. Let's pause here to see if anyone has any questions or comments on the things that we've covered. As I said, it's not our intention right now to get into great depth on that. I'm going to be sharing a document that goes into a little more detail on these bills. That includes links to the state legislative website where you can read the bills. And then I'm going to ask you, I'll actually do that right now by sharing a form. If you haven't already signed up, you can respond to WABA via this form. And we'd like to get you involved in the advocacy with the General Assembly, get you to submit testimony, bring you along when we testify, help you, that is, not just throw you into the deep end there. So if you haven't already and you're in Prince George's, you can respond to that form. I'm going to put in my own email address here, and I will share Peter's as well. As another WABA organizer. If anyone else out there, and several of you would like to share your email contact information for people to contact you about particular topics, please go ahead and use the chat for that. So here I've brought up Oh, Jeff, I guess you wanted to say a bit about the Greenbelt East Trail, which I'll let you do, but I do have one more thing to get to. I told you all I was going to try to keep this to an hour. We're going to go a little bit over there. I do expect to be at this Terps for Bike Lanes fundraiser tomorrow evening. I know that Jeff will be there, right? And Peter and various other people, so you can talk to us more about legislation then. But I would like to move on to talk about a WABA initiative, and I'll spend just 5 minutes on this. I have a few slides. This initiative is called Complete State Roads, and it is about safe infrastructure for vulnerable road users on and along Maryland highways, state highways. Vulnerable road users are people who are walking, biking, in a wheelchair perhaps, or a scooter, people who are not protected by thousands of pounds of steel around them. So the state roads are the most dangerous. We saw that slide earlier of Prince George's County road deaths. If you were, I'm not going to bring it back up, but if you were to trace where those deaths are occurring, their majority are on state roads. Those are the fastest travel for vehicles. They're the widest, meaning they take longer for pedestrian to cross. The cars are not looking out for bicyclists. They're most dangerous, hence this concentration. The State Highway Administration has already committed to what are called complete streets, to making, you can see the date here, 2013 to 15, 10 years ago, accommodations for bicycling and walking as a routine and integral element. And we want to hold them to these promises that they've made by creating complete streets. Complete streets have accommodations for pedestrians, for bicyclists, for transit, as well as for motor vehicles, because they're a reality of our society. So we have a lot of work we can do. The funding is challenging, but we do have the data that supports doing this work, and we have the tools. In particular, the State Highway Administration, the Maryland Department of Transportation, has a toolkit called Context Driven that considers areas in various types, urban versus rural versus town center, and so on. I want you to take a look at this context-driven map that I have displayed on the screen. I'm assuming that you know Washington, D.C. area geography well enough to know that Prince George's County is roughly east of Washington, D.C. Montgomery County is roughly here north and northwest. And look at the difference in the number and density of treatments that the State Highway Administration and Department of Transportation have implemented in Montgomery County versus Prince George's. And we already saw that and discussed that the rate of road deaths and serious injuries is 3 times higher in Prince George's than in Montgomery, worst in the state. So this initiative, the Complete State Roads Initiative, is about pressing the state to do what we know that they should be doing, what they know they should be doing. So it is something that I'm developing, consulting with legislators, with advocates in the community, and I'd love to hear from you about that. And I'm working on that over the next few months, and we'll release it, target late April maybe, if we can get it done by then. So what we're asking is to remake state highway corridors as complete streets via lane narrowing, speed limit reduction, safer intersections and crossing, sidewalks and bikeways, and enlist the support of all the players who actually have power to get stuff done here. So I'm going to stop there and invite you. I sent my email address already to send me any kind of questions, or if you want to get involved in supporting the initiative, that would be wonderful. But one of the corridors that we would like to see remade is Maryland 193 across Montgomery County. That is University Boulevard into Prince George's County. When it becomes Greenbelt Road, it also changes other designations. And I would just invite Jeff Lemieux to say a few words about the initiative that he has been pursuing related to 193 in Prince George's County as an example of a state road that needs work, and as an example of an area where advocacy that Jeff has spearheaded has been very effective so far. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, it's been very effective, except the fact we don't
So
have any
far.
results. Yeah, right.
So far.
Right. So the Greenbelt East Trail would run from Greenbelt into Glendale, connecting to the WBNA trail. The website is greenbeltnasatrail.org for reasons I'm not real clear on, but that was how I named the website, greenbeltnasatrail.org. We should be getting our first feasibility studies in February. They'll be dribbling out this winter and spring, and then we'll figure out whether this has any real viability. And, you know, just to end on a sour note, frankly, we had a pedestrian killed on one end of the proposed trail in October near Greenway Center. We had a 4-year-old child killed on the other end of the trail in Glendale by Daisy Lane more recently. You know, it's just a very unsafe road, and we're trying to make it at least safe for biking and walking, and hopefully the addition of a trail will also calm traffic.
Great. Well, Christina shared a link for the Greenbelt East Trail, which is great. Do we have any questions for Jeff or about legislation and so on? All right. We're not too far off on time for ending. So I am going to follow up with an email message to everyone who registered with a link for
Seth, there is a hand up.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm
Steve.
just not seeing these things. Okay, Steve Hardig. Sorry,
Yes,
I just wasn't seeing these things.
very interested in the information on the complete state roads concept. Is there a mailing list I can sign up for that?
Not yet. You can send me a note, or I have your, I'm just going to write myself a note to get in touch with you if you you know where I am though.
Yeah, that's of the things I saw today, that's the most exciting to me. You know, living between 3 major state roads. So
Yeah, yeah. I'll say, you know, I can't help but make a remark, which is that with the state's major transportation funding shortfall, there is one bit of silver lining there, which is that the State Highway Administration has been pursuing a really bad Beltway crossing at Medical Center Drive in Prince George's, formerly Arena Drive. It would have implemented a so-called diverging diamond interchange, which multiplies the number of crossings that a pedestrian or a bicyclist must make of cars, or I should say cars crossing. The expensive project, price tag start at the $90 million range. Of course, everything comes in over budget when it's a capital project. So that's one bit of silver lining that's not going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, I would love to get people involved in the Complete State Roads Initiative, and you can send me a note. So I'm just going to, by way of closing, anyone else? I'm sorry, I didn't see the raised hands the last couple of times. All right, I'm just going to reshare this slide. It does have my email address on here. And, you know, this is what we're about. Complete streets, making it safe for bicyclists of all abilities, for people who are walking. Well, in this particular photo, the street has been closed for a festival or something, but there you go. In any case, we'd love to have you involved. I shared that form. I will reshare it in my follow-up email. And thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, Seth.
You said.
Thanks, Seth.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.